Let's go ahead and get started. Melissa Schultz with Schultz Nonprofit Law. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar on updates and resources related to the COVID-19 crisis and some of the financial support that nonprofits may be able to take advantage of. Joined today by my colleagues Jeff Femright and Sarah Kissel, who will be speaking shortly. I'll do a few updates before we get there. We did get our website revised, so we now have a COVID-19 page that is a little easier to access, we hope. Kind of using it as a bulletin board. Given my age, that makes sense to me, where I just want to post things and not, we're trying to avoid sending. I'm looking at a very sweet dog on my screen right now who's distracting. Hello, dog. Anyway, we will do updates there and then try to send out a bigger blast once a week, so we're not sending so many emails. But do check back often if you're interested, because things are changing every day. And then as far as updates, I think Sarah will talk about it, but we did get some action out of the Wisconsin legislature last week related to some of the employment programs and implementing some of the federal opportunities there. We're hoping that the Congress will take additional action. As you all have heard by now, I'm sure, that the various loan programs ran out of money, but Jeff will talk a little more about that. Yesterday, we heard from the governor's office and DHS around what they're called the Badger Bounce Back Plan. And I will tell you, having read the 6 pages, right now it tells us to wash our hands and to stay inside, and that we need testing. So there is a good, very helpful chart that helps us see how things will roll out with, at first groups of 10, groups of 50, and then larger groups. I think expanding the definition of essential businesses, but none of that can happen or will start to happen at least at this point. There are legal challenges, so who knows what will change, but until we get better access to what they are calling, the gating, to do the testing and be able to do the tracking. So we're all staying tuned there. So let's get started. I guess a few housekeeping things. Please do mute yourself. Actually, given the number of people, well, I reserve the right to mute you all if needed. But otherwise, please do use the chat function. I should have mentioned my colleague Jessica Harrison is also on the Zoom with us, and both Jessica and I will be tracking the questions that are coming in via chat, trying to facilitate combining those, getting those to Jeff and Sarah as needed. And one other point on the chat, you can direct them just to me if you don't want to direct them to everyone. And then we are thinking of dividing this up and reserving the last part of it for people who haven't yet applied for the PPP. So a number of people already are waiting to hear or have applied for the EIDL. We think there's others who haven't applied but are still thinking of it. And so I think we'll reserve that to the end. So if again, Jeff will start out with some updates though on that. And I guess I will go ahead and mute you all. And then toward the end, we can open it back up for questions, but the chat function will be working as we go. So thanks. And Jeff, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Bear with me for a second, because when I mute everyone, I'm going to mute you, but then I'm going to unmute Jeff. Hold on.
Okay.
All right.
Can everybody just go like this if you can hear me? Okay, good. Thank you. That worked. It's amazing how we've gotten so facile with this Zoom technology that none of us had ever heard of 7 weeks ago. So as Melissa indicated, I'm the person here at Schultz Nonprofit Law who is most focused on the SBA programs, specifically the PPP and the EIDL loans, and some of the other financing programs that are available to small businesses, including nonprofits. What I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to start out just providing a short update on where the legislation is on this and what type of funding we're looking at for this next phase of the SBA loans. Then I'm going to talk a little bit anecdotally about what's actually going out there in the real world, going on out there in the real world with lenders and small businesses who are trying to access these funds. It's, none of this is objective. We haven't really had a chance to measure it, but I have been talking to people I know in the lending community and in the borrowing community, trying to get a sense of how this is all working. And, so I have a little bit of anecdotal feedback on that, that will maybe help you who have not, those of you who have not applied, help you avoid some pitfalls moving forward. The third thing I'm going to talk about is just establishing some strategies. If you have not applied for these programs, what should you be thinking about going forward? And then finally, before Sarah talks, just some other types of options that may be available, from the state and from some other entities that if, while everybody's focused on PPP and EIDL, and those are the big buckets of money, there are some other resources that might be available to some parties that you can take a look at. Then my colleague Sarah is going to talk, and then I'm going to come back at the end and talk some more about the PPP application process. What we found in the feedback back from you folks in our frequently asked questions is there's been some challenges for some 501c3s working on these PPP applications. It's one of those things that because these programs are moving at 90 miles an hour, historically, if the SBA was going to roll out a program, they would take the time and put together an application for for-profit businesses and then another application for small profit businesses, and they would cross their T's and dot their I's. What they did in this instance is they threw together a 2-page application in order to get money out the door. And especially for some of our nonprofit clients, they've found the questions are more geared towards for-profits and trying to just kind of work through and how do I answer these types of questions has been a challenge for some folks. And we've gotten feedback on that. So what we're going to do at the end is, for those of you who want to stay on, I'm going to walk through that PPP application and provide some suggested answers for some of the questions that don't fit neatly into what we do. And so that will come at the end. So everyone is welcome to stay for that if you would like.
Jeff, I'm going to jump in quickly on something I meant to mention, but it is applicable to what you're talking about. Is one of the challenges, as Jeff just pointed out, is finding a lender that understands nonprofits and perhaps is prioritizing nonprofits, particularly smaller ones. And I reached out to our very good friend in the community, Sally Martiniak, the former president of Forward Community Investments, which is a community development financial institution, which is basically another kind of financial institution that lends a lot to nonprofits, can lend to small businesses as well. But she is working on connecting us to a source possibly out of Illinois that may have a program where they're trying to prioritize nonprofits and make the process more straightforward. So stay tuned on that. If we find out that that is in fact an encouraging source and that we would like to direct you there, we will have another brief webinar on that or an update. And we understand the urgency of that. So we're working to make that happen in the next 24 hours. And we always appreciate Sally's help in looking out for the community and using her connections. So back to you, Jeff.
No, that's good advice. Looking for alternative sources to the programs that everybody is applying for should be part of your strategy through this. Okay, so what's going on Capitol Hill? As of this morning, the legislation is kind of temporarily stalled as Republicans and Democrats fight over certain issues, but I think there's a general agreement that there is going to be substantial new funding coming for the SBA, for the PPP and the EIDL loan programs. As of this morning, it looks like $310 billion for the PPP and another 60 for the EIDL. Now, one of the things you need to know about the EIDL, we've been telling everybody, and everything you've read has said that if you get an EIDL, that first $10,000 is going to be a grant. Because the program's been so oversubscribed, they have modified that rule, so you no longer get, that first 10,000 as a grant. What they are allowing is for you to get $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. But if you only have 3 employees, you'd only be eligible for $3,000 as a grant. So a slight change to that program. But anyways, it looks like $370 billion altogether. 310 again for PPL, 60 for EIDL. This money went fast last time. It's going to go fast again. So our advice to you is, if you have not applied for these programs, to get your acts together and get those applications prepared. Anecdotally, what we're hearing is that the banks, unsurprisingly, are completely oversubscribed on the PPPs. You'll recall that the PPPs flow through local lending institutions. The EIDLs are applications that are made directly to the SBA. But for the PPPs, the banks are completely oversubscribed. And anecdotally, this is what I got from one of my banker friends from one of the larger banks, but they had roughly 5,000 applications. 2,000 of those were approved, and they've got 3,000 sitting in the pipe, and at this point are not accepting any more applications. So that's the world that you're looking at. You folks are not the only ones that are looking at these lending programs. Everyone's looking at them. And so you need to kind of develop a strategy on how best to maximize your possibility of getting the loan funds. At this point, this is what I think. The larger banks, and the larger banks do lots of good work, but for the most part, it seems like they are focusing on larger customers. So unless you have a ongoing credit relationship with a larger bank, the BMOs, the US banks of the world, it might be better to focus your time on smaller banks. We're hearing that some of the smaller community banks in the area do have some capacity. And so, reach out to them. As part of this new funding, 60 billion of that 310 billion is going to be set aside for small community banks. And so, and that's to focus this, to focus the program into rural areas, as well as, the larger areas where you're competing with larger borrowers. So to the extent that you have not gotten funded yet, I would encourage you to take a look at the small community banks, both here in the city and, out in the rest of Dane County, take a look at the Bank of McFarland, the bank, the State Bank of Cross Plains, Oregon, Deerfield, some of these smaller banks that maybe people aren't paying as much attention to. There might be some opportunities there. But keep in mind,
we of course mean credit unions too.
I do mean credit unions. I do mean credit unions as well. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to leave out the credit unions.
Yeah, Summit Credit Union I've heard consistently as being very responsive. I also, someone just said that Monona State Bank was very cooperative and moved quickly. So.
Yep. Yeah, Monona Bank's been a very good friend to nonprofits throughout the years, and so that doesn't surprise me. So anyways, there's lots of competition. To give you a sense, in the last round, there's roughly 30 million small businesses in the United States of America, and 1.6 million of them got a PPP loans. So that's what you're looking at. And on this next one, they're expecting a burn rate of about $50 billion a day. So from the time it's funded until it runs out, think about there being 6 days. So, it's time for you to, get your acts together and make sure that your organization is in a position to succeed. Again, at this point, try, even if lenders are not taking applications now, try to identify who your lender might be. And that would be, again, if you've got a credit relationship, go there first. If you've got a deposit relationship, go there. Reach out to your stakeholders. Who are the people on your board? Who do they know? Does somebody know a guy who knows a guy? Right? Use those relationships and leverage them. Look at the community banks and the credit unions, as I mentioned. Go out into some of the smaller communities where there might not be as much a demand and who are now, promised $60 billion in funding. So that might be a better opportunity for you. You've heard it here before, and again, anecdotally, this is true, be organized. Every banker that I've talked to in the last 3 weeks laments the borrower who comes in and they've got a file full of paper and it's to say, and they want to hand them 20 sheets of paper separately. Those people are a problem. Don't be a problem. Come in with your package put together. Take a look at the checklist that we put together. Make sure that you've got a clean package of documents. Show your work. It's like back in middle school, show how you got to your answers, put your officer certificates and your resolutions together, especially if this is a new relationship. If they don't know who you are, if all of a sudden you are you're at the bank of small town Dane County, and you walk in the door and they might want to help you, but they need to know who you are. If you put an officer certificate together, again, as we've attached to the checklist, those types of packages have been successful. One of our clients told us that they came in, they had everything, they had our checklist, they had all their homework shown, they had their officer certificate and their application. They handed it all in one clean package, and the banker just said, "I'm just sending this on." Right? So the more organized you are, the less trouble you are, the more likely you are to get funded. Okay.
I have one more question from the crowd here. Are you eligible for the next round of PPP if you've already received a loan in the first round?
No.
No.
One PPP.
Yep. Yep.
Which is a really nice segue, because here on my list is but you can apply for both PPPs and EIDLs.
Great. All right. Go
Another
for it.
question?
Nope. That's it for now.
Okay. With that outstanding segue, any business owner, anyone who runs an organization knows that cash flow is king. And that's the biggest problem small organizations are having right now. So knowing that, the PPP is certainly where people are going first, but think about doing the EIDL, think about doing them either or both, even if you don't think you need an EIDL, I would consider applying for it because, the interest rate is so low and the term of the loan is so long that if you want to borrow $50,000 under the EIDL, your P&I payment, first of all, the first year is deferred, but starting a year from now, your P&I payment for the next 30 years would be $205 a month. So that's what you can get for a $50,000 loan. So, and if you end up not using it, you can pay it back without any penalties. So assess your cash flow situations. PPP is obviously a great way to make sure your employees get paid, but don't discount the EIDL because it's not forgivable. It's still very cheap money that you can pay back over a long period of time. And if you're running into cash flow challenges, it can be very, very helpful. Okay, there's a couple of other options. As I said before, the two big buckets are EIDL and PPP. There's a couple of other options that are coming online now. We've got the Wisconsin Small Business 2020, and that's for existing borrowers who have cash flow issues and have existing relationships with CDFIs. So Melissa was talking about our good friend Sally. Sally used to be the president of Ford Community Investments. They're a CDFI. There are a number of CDFIs, and they do lending to nonprofits. So if you have an existing relationship with a CDFI, under the Wisconsin Small Business 2020 Act, there are cash flow loans that are available to you. You have to have an existing relationship. You can't create a new relationship, but if you have that, take a look at that program.
Jeff, while you're looking, I'm going to jump in. We have several questions from people who are asking, they've already applied, they have not heard back and gotten an answer yet on their PPP loan, but they haven't been rejected. Should they apply somewhere else or should they wait to hear?
I would encourage them to apply somewhere else.
Really? Okay.
Knowing if you, I haven't really thought about that question.
Okay.
Obviously you can't receive two PPP loans.
Yeah.
But there's no reason you can't apply for two PPP loans.
Yeah, and I guess I would, that makes sense with the one caveat that if you have a relationship and actually have a banker, credit union member, staff that you can speak to and find out if your application is truly, through the process and it's just waiting for funding, then, I think you're better off, being there. Or sticking with where you started, because if you start over somewhere else, there's still steps that you have to go through, and no guarantee that you get through those steps when the new funding comes through. So do try to be in touch if it's pending. Try to be in touch with whoever you can there and see what you can figure out. Okay, fast and furious, they are coming. Someone was told that they could not get a PPP and an EIDL loan. That is not true. It is true that if you'd received an EIDL prior to, I think that was the date, April 3rd.
Yep.
Then there was a problem. But if you've received it after that.
Not a problem, you just have to wrap it into your PPP.
Oh, I see, got it, okay. And another question, has anyone heard back on their EIDL? Yes. We do know someone that's been funded. We do have a client that applied very early on. I don't know if it was April 3rd or 4th, like right when it opened up. They heard back 10 days later, not with the money, but with information about the 1,000 per employee issue and are waiting to hear. And I know people are asking us, what's the next step? I wish I could tell you. At this point, I know it's extremely disconcerting because I know most people who have applied for the EIDL haven't heard anything, so, or many. So it really seems that rather than the money being in your account within 10 days, that you hope to hear your first feedback in the first 10 days, and then there's more steps. That's what I can offer at this point. Yeah, someone did confirm that the local SBA office said definitely apply for both. Todd has pointed out to us that we think the 2020 grant is only for for-profits that have a loan with a CDFI. So we'll look into that. So there are CDFIs in the state that do fund for-profits. So, okay, back to you, Jeff, or are we ready for Sarah?
No, I think we can move on to Sarah.
Okay, great. And like I said, we will save time at the end for, I'll unmute you all and more of a Q&A with Jeff on the loans. And the EIDL, one more question here. The EIDL does not run through a bank, it's straight through the SBA.
Correct. The application is online.
Someone else is saying, if you get the 10,000 from the EIDL, it must be deducted from the forgivable part of the PPP loan. That's not exactly right. It's just that you can't apply the same expenses. The 10,000 that you're using to pay wages on, your employees cannot be the same 10,000 that you then claim as an eligible expense for the PPP. Okay. And one more helpful comment from, well, you guys can read this, but first you heard back the application was complete, then you hear it's approved, then you receive the money in your account. The whole process took 7 days. Okay, well, that's good, except that I know some for whom it's taken longer than 7 days. But yes, that is the EIDL that I think Darren's referring to. Is that right, Darren? The EIDL? Yeah, you can chat back. Oh, that was PPP. Yes, it is true. PPPs have moved in 3 to 5 days, I've heard, once if you got through. So, okay, Sarah, we're moving on to you, and I need to unmute you. Hold on.
I think I'm unmuted. Yes.
Oh, good. All right.
You know what? I had one question for Jeff before he's off the hook, and I don't know that we got to it completely. Is one development that came up that we were aware of just I think in the last week is that the EIDLs are attached somewhat to the number of employees that you have, at least initially.
Yeah, he spoke. He meant.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I must have had my head in something else. Sorry there.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm glad you talked to that. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to shift into, we're going to talk about things aside from the PPP. I know not everybody has gotten one, or maybe, maybe they're, curious about what else is out there. Also, some of the things I'm about to get into are applicable to employers once your PPP runs out. So good information to know. What I hope to highlight today is two things that really haven't gotten as much attention I'd say in national news and whatnot, because we have been so focused on these loans, which are so important. One is the employee retention tax credit. I'm going to talk about that. And the other is I'm going to get into unemployment insurance. I'm also going to show you around the Department of Workforce Development's website a little bit, just because they have made a lot of changes. And I know that even employers really need to understand how this is working as they evaluate what to do if there's any reduction in hours. And there are a lot of opportunities out there. It's a lot to take in. I'm going to rely on some slides because I tend to be more of a visual learner, but I'm also going to encourage people to pose questions through the chat. I can stop at any time if we need to talk about something more, and certainly we can do questions at the end. So Excuse my clunkiness for a moment as I get the slides going. And I need to. All right, is everybody able to see the beginning of this slideshow then? Yeah, okay, see some nods. Awesome, thank you. All right, Jeff had already touched on this, but just as a reminder, these laws are so new. Regulations are still coming out. I feel confident about the information that I'm giving you today. So if you hear something new in the next few days, even from me or from our website, things are subject to change as more information comes out as regulations are released. Okay, oh, and I meant to warn you all. I'm about to show you a really confusing flowchart that hopefully by the end of this makes a lot of sense. Okay, and this is the way that my mind works, is I'm looking at 3 different buckets on the left side column of my screen here of what employers' options are through COVID-19. Jeff just touched nicely on the PPP loan. One reminder is that even with the PPP loan, if you have anybody who has employees working right now needs to make sure that they've met their notice requirements of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. I'm not going to get into too much detail on that right now because I did cover it in our webinar 2 weeks ago, which is on our website if you need to review or look at any of the materials that were released in the back of my slideshow. There were many resources that are still very reliable. So let's see, I'm going to shift ahead as I just covered that one there. I just mentioned the poster. Do make sure that you have posted that. I heard some reluctance from people that they wanted to really master FFCRA before they sent out an email to everyone with the notice poster. Get that notice out right away because that's what's going to get you in more trouble than if you have to dig for answers if someone does make make an application or appeal to you for using this this paid leave. And just a reminder, as I shift into talking about the employee retention tax credit, if you use any wages that apply towards the FFCRA credit, obviously won't be eligible for the ERTC, but they can be used together just on different wages as you're accounting. So here's our focus for employers without PPP. This was part of that second line of that very busy flowchart that I showed you. First, I want to talk about how with or without an EIDL, you certainly, if you have employees still working, you need to be responsible for the Families First Coronavirus Response Act obligations. But there's also this employee retention tax credit. The one thing they have in common, other than being credits, is that both of them, the credits can be claimed on your quarterly 2 Form 941 that's going to be due in about 3 months' time, including a refund should the amount that you're due be more than the amount that you're paying in. Let's see, and the information that was in the webinar 2 weeks ago is still accurate on that as well, with a little more detail in there if you need to review that. Just going deeper into what the employee retention tax credit is, how it works. There's an eligibility for nonprofits and other businesses that meet either of these criteria. So this is what makes you eligible. You are either fully or partially suspended in your operations by a government authority that limits commerce, travel, or group meetings because of COVID-19, and it's this year during 2020. That's a lot of organizations. A lot has been focused on the gross receipt qualifier. That's another one, but for a lot of people, that's not showing up yet. Their quarterly 1 receipts are not 50% lower than what their 2019 quarter 1 gross receipts are. So do pay attention to this fully or partially suspended operations. All right, well, we'll get a little bit more into now what it does for you. So for the implementation, as I'd mentioned, you're going to put that on your 941, and the credit is claimed against the employer's share of Social Security. As I'd mentioned, there's a Form 7200. More information will be coming out on this. Obviously, the filing won't be happening for another 2 months plus, and it won't be due for another 3 months. But bear that in mind. And then how it applies, well, it applies to both wages and benefits. starting with March 13th. So even though there's a little sliver of Q1 in there, that'll all get reported with any Q2 tax credits that are earned. It's 50% of wages and benefits with a maximum of $5,000 per employee. So if you spend $10,000 on an employee, 50% of that is going to be applied towards this credit. All right. So that's employee retention tax credit in a nutshell. A good one to know of a very low bar for entry, and something that if you have any employees to look at. The second part of that line that I showed you in that beginning slide with a lot going on with that flow chart was another side of what to do if you're reducing but not eliminating all of your staff at this time. There is some relief available from the CARES Act that I spoke about in our last webinar, but there's a lot of new information, particularly with respect to the Wisconsin Work-Share program. A lot has changed since just last Wednesday when Wisconsin passed Act 185 and it spoke to many things. I'm not going to be talking about nearly even everything that's employment related from what came from 185, but I do want to drill down on these things that are related to financing. So let's see. Oh, so here is what I have done. Because the Department of Workforce Development is super, super busy right now, they have not updated their website with regard to Workshare at all. So I have offered my my suggestions for how the website should look by taking what has changed with Act 185 and putting it in here. I'd given an overview last time of Workshare, but ultimately Workshare allows an employer who would have to start laying off employees to, instead of doing that, to reduce wages, reduce time at the hours at the job, and continue to pay for that which is being worked, but give their employees some relief for that which they aren't getting paid for through partial unemployment insurance. Now, what we learned through the CARES Act is that instead of being paid for through the employer's unemployment insurance account, that's going to get paid for, that's going to be federally funded. So my first change here is who pays for the benefits. Instead of it being the employer's unemployment insurance account, I've changed that to 100% funded through the CARES Act, and that's through the end of this year. The really big changes that happened last week, which are very exciting and applicable for a lot of employers now, is that instead of having the restriction that to get into one of these plans, you had to have 20 positions and 10% or 10% of the employees in a work unit, they've eliminated the work unit and they've dropped the number down to a minimum of 2 employees that are going to participate in this. So it's a huge change, and it really welcomes in a lot of organizations that have even just 2 employees and need to cut down wages, cut down the amount that they're having staff work. You'll note down here that the original plan was you had to make a reduction that was somewhere between 10 and 50%. They've extended that even to, you can reduce people's hours by 60%. So a little bit has changed as well in terms of how to get this started. And the changes are down here under what is a Workshare plan. When the plan is submitted, when there's an application made, the employer now need only specify the affected positions and the names of the employees that are holding those positions when the application is made. Again, we've eliminated work unit, we've eliminated the number from 20 to 2. Then in the next slide, which is the second page of this, really key part in how this really benefits employees is that the employees that are receiving this UI will also be eligible automatically to receive the FPUC, which is, it's that extra $600 in addition to whatever unemployment insurance an employee is receiving. So it's on top of that. So in many scenarios that people have posed about, there's a very good chance that people could be receiving this, receiving higher pay. So not suffering at all. while still continuing to be employed, continuing to get healthcare benefits, and the employer is relieved from having to keep everybody on at full staff or dock their wages. And really the employer's just paying for the wages that they are working and benefits. One last thing to note about this is on their website right now, it still says you can apply by mail or fax. They don't want you to do that. Part of it was that it'll be an online form. I read something that said that it would be within a week, which would mean in 2 days. I don't know that the website will be up and running by then, but stay tuned if it's something that seems like it would work. I would suspect if they follow the same pattern they did with the other types of individual unemployment insurance, we'll start getting some notices on their webpage. They're not there yet, but we'll start getting some notices letting us know that it's coming and when to be checking back. All right, so that's my shtick on Workshare, which is, as I said, please look into it if you're in that position of needing to cut back on the amount of time people are working and you want to do so in a way that doesn't harm your employees. Let's see, so moving on from here, another question that's come up and will help lay the groundwork for the next bit of what I want to explain to people is a lot of folks have had some concerns or some questions about what is a layoff versus furlough. I'm not getting into this super deeply here, but I want to give people at least an understanding of how it's all working right now. The term layoff is usually talking about a final or permanent termination, and when you do that, you're going to be removing the employee from payroll, from the benefit plan. You're going to have to give them a COBRA notice if they've been receiving benefits covered by the employer, and follow any other termination policies that your organization has in place. So pretty final. What we're recommending is that employers instead, if they have to even reduce hours down to 0, that they opt for a furlough. And in this case, the employee's hours and wages are reduced. Like I said, they could be to 0. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about this as a temporary layoff. The intention is to return the employee to the previous status when the employer is able to do that. And the employee does remain on the payroll. If the employer can, it's optional, but the employee can continue to receive the benefits that they were receiving while employed. And it does not limit their unemployment eligibility. So you don't have to lay off an employee so that they can start receiving all of these different sources of unemployment that are available. So I wanted to review that, just as I know there's been a lot of confusion. All right, moving ahead. About unemployment insurance in general, I have some golden rules for people. And the first one, and this is for both claimants or employees as well as employers, is flag everything that is COVID-19 as COVID-19 on all unemployment insurance documentations. Claimants should do it when they are filing for a claim and applying, and employers should do this on all their documentation. Any communication with the Department of Workforce Development, and certainly when they receive any requests for information from them. Number 2, and this also applies to both groups, is a stress on being timely and accurate. So for claimants, encourage your employees, or if you yourself are in a position where you're going to need to apply for partial or full unemployment insurance benefits, file as soon as possible. The website has stressed that if you start your application, start it and can't complete it because the system is logged or completely locked up. If you have about 28 days, I believe, want to double check on that, but quite a bit of time to complete the application, and it still holds your place in line. So encourage people, or if you yourself are in that boat, get it started as soon as possible. Let's see, and another stressor they have is don't commit fraud. I've had a lot of people ask, well, why wouldn't anybody just say they were starting a position? Well, that would be fraud, and of course we wouldn't want anybody to be doing that, and it could be potentially some real ramifications. Then as far as employers go, be very quick to respond and with accuracy on any requests for information. Not only is it the right thing to do, but there's some bite back where you lose some of the financial opportunity, which I'll talk about in just a moment, if you're not doing that. All right, I'm going to move on to my very last line of my flow chart, which is where you're eliminating staff. And I've got an example at the end that I hope will explain this a little bit more. But before I get into that, I'm going to, as promised, show you around the Department of Workforce Development's unemployment insurance page a little bit more. Just want to comment on that. First off, we're going to take the Family First Coronavirus Response Act off the table if you don't have employees. I still have the employee retention tax credit listed up here, and the reason I do is for that reason I noted before. If you were to furlough an employee but continue to cover their health insurance benefits, that would be eligible for the 50% credit to up to $5,000 per employee, or up to $10,000 of their wages or benefits. The aid that's available for employers is divided differently between those that are contributory UI payers, and that, importantly, this is not going to be charged to their account if, under those golden rules, people are very clear that this unemployment is related to COVID-19. It's going to go against the Wisconsin balancing account, not an employer's individual account. And also there is the opportunity to defer unemployment insurance benefits, and I'll be able to show you on their website where there's more information about that if that's something you're going to pursue. As far as the reimbursable employers go, it's still where it was 2 weeks ago, in that the CARES Act is financing 50% of any amount that a reimbursable employer is going to have to pay out in traditional unemployment insurance benefits, which is a lot, but otherwise the employer is paying for this. All right. So we're here at the new and improved part of the Department of Workforce Development CARES Act webpage for unemployment insurance. And I won't get into too much of the details here, although I do recommend that you take some time and look at it yourself, because it really nicely explains what the different benefits are. One question, oh, Melissa's giving me a raised finger. Yep, question?
I can wait if you want to finish the slide.
Okay. One question you might yield is, are these unemployment insurance benefits going to be subject to income taxes? Yes, they are. So recipients want to be proactive if they want to have taxes taken out. That's it for this slide, because I was going to move on to the next one.
All right, what's the next slide? Let me figure out where my questions fall.
Okay, maybe I'll hit it. All right. So the next area I'm going to show is just, if you were to click on here, the COVID-19 unemployment facts. Oh, wait. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. There's a handy dandy flow chart that the website has put up that also is nice if that's more the way your brain works, or your employees' brains work, to understand how all of these work together, who will receive benefits. I recommend checking it out, or directing employees to it if they're going to be making a claim.
Okay, I'm going to jump in now.
Yes.
So, number of questions. Do you have to wait if you received a PPP, do you have to wait the full 8 weeks period until you could apply for the DWD plan? The answer is no. Just keep in mind that if you are reducing your payroll, then that is, you will have fewer forgivable expenses to attribute, given that you have to have 75% of your expenses be payroll. If you got a certain amount of a loan based on that number, and then you reduce payroll, then you will have fewer expenses to report as forgivable.
Right. Plus, as Jeff had mentioned, you want to meet that 75% of what you're going to be showing as forgivable has to be towards payroll costs. Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. So that's a really good question and a perfect answer. You can do it. It's just diminishing that loan forgiveness. Although, run the equation. I mean, for some people that might make sense.
Right. And then someone's asking, if someone took a 5% decrease in salary, are they eligible for unemployment? I'm
I'm going to assume that it's a salaried employee that is exempt. And if that's the case, that exempt employee would still need to be making $684 a week. And if you apply for just partial unemployment insurance, not under WorkShare actually allows you to surpass this minimum, but but just applying as an individual for partial unemployment insurance benefits in Wisconsin, you can't be making more than $500 a week in wages. So, so maybe that also answers the question if we're not talking about an exempt employee, but if we are, just by virtue of the fact that you'd still have to be making $684, no.
Okay, sounds like we need to drill down too. I mean, because I even have more questions on how that would work. So let's save that. So someone's asking, can you get the PPP and the employee relief tax credit? No.
No, those definitely don't work together.
Right.
Yep.
But after June 30th, so if you have a PPP now, and that's why I think Sarah said this is for like after, if your PPP, you use that up and you've applied, you get the forgivable amount, then this tax credit is in place according to the regs, at least through December 31st of this year.
Yes, and that makes sense to me as well. I've not seen anything, I've been looking, but I haven't seen anything to qualify and say that, yes, once your PPP has run out, all these options are back on the table. It would make sense that that will be the case, but I don't know it to be yet.
Okay, that is it for now, and I will go ahead, Sarah.
What was
Okay.
upstairs?
Yeah,
Somebody else have a question?
scavenger hunt on the call.
Oh, I think somebody's just got they're not muted. Okay, I'm almost done here. I'm going to talk or show you those 2 pages where there are really helpful questions and answers. This is under the unemployment facts from that main CARES page that you can link to. And the beginning of the page starts off with information for claimants. And I thought this was a good opportunity to point out in case this is also a question is the Wisconsin Act 185 last week did waive the waiting week for people, and people who have served the waiting week already since March 15th will be eligible to receive that. That'll be coming out at a later point. They'll actually get compensated for having to do the waiting week when they've decided to waive it. When you scroll down on the page, and I do just have screenshots of this because I was concerned with there being so much traffic today with the PUA insurance, it being the first day people could apply for that. I have these screenshots. If I were to scroll down on this page, there would be information for employers. This is what I was just mentioning a moment ago with deferring unemployment insurance payments quarterly. So if you haven't paid them yet this month, they're due at the end of this month. If you haven't paid them yet for Q1 and you're looking for another way to defer some costs, here's some information about how that can be done. So that brings me back to my confusing flowchart that hopefully isn't so confusing anymore, I hope, that speaks to the different options that are out there in addition to the PPP loan through use of the EIDLs or not, optional in both cases, these other forms of credit, the partial unemployment insurance that we've been speaking about either through WorkShare or just individually applying, and then how employers are receiving some real financial aid in terms of how they fund unemployment insurance that's available to their employees. If there are questions, I can answer questions. I've also got a case scenario if that helps people see how this could all work.
I think that's great, Sarah. I think you should do a case scenario.
Sure. Okay.
And because I already forgot my question. Go ahead.
Okay. Feel free to interrupt anytime. All right. So what I did was I created an organization called Youth Adventure Incorporated. And this organization is something that's really active in the summer. Okay. Again, I made this up. This isn't my client. So now with no summer activities, Youth Adventure decides they're just going to skip this summer and they're going to begin again in this fall. They're going to regroup then to start planning summer of 2021. So I've made them have 12 regular employees, just for purposes of this demonstrating how all of this works. So one thing to keep in mind, for the regular employees, they're going to reduce the workload of these 12 regular employees. First off, all of the wages and benefits that they are eligible for, because they've been actually fully suspended in their operations due to COVID-19. So they are eligible for the employee retention tax credit. For their exempt employees, and I've had a lot of questions about this too, understandably, is you can prospectively reduce wages on exempt employees, but you need to keep them at $684 or more per week in order to keep them exempt. And or you can require that they use some of their paid time off leave. For the non-exempt employees, I'm saying there's 9 of these here, they are an excellent candidate for using the WorkShare program. So they apply for a WorkShare program where they could reduce their hours up to 60%. The organization, Youth Adventure, is only going to pay for the wages for the hours that are worked. And the employees are going to receive unemployment insurance for their hours that are reduced, and they're going to receive an extra $600 a week of federally funded credit, federally funded unemployment insurance, a bonus on top of that, all of which is funded through the CARES Act. So again, financially funded, Wisconsin implemented. All right. Then, in addition to these 2 camps of employees that work throughout the year, they have some employees that are seasonal employees. And I do use the word layoff here for what they're doing, because in a typical hiring season, they would hire everybody in the spring, summer to work for the summer, and then they would no longer be on the rolls. They would fire or release and then bring back on. So for this scenario here, they would lay off or prevent the start date of 175 seasonal employees. They should encourage all of them to apply for unemployment insurance benefits. The employees who are laid off, let's say they hire the first 25 that are going to be the ones that train the rest of the seasonal employees, and they've already been working for a while. They should indicate when they apply for unemployment insurance benefits that they're being laid off due to COVID-19. And if they would otherwise be eligible for unemployment insurance benefits, there'll be no charge for contributory employers. And for the reimbursable employers, they'll have to pay 50% of their benefits. However, if these employees, for whatever reason, probably insufficient work history, would not normally be eligible for traditional unemployment insurance, this too will be covered by the pandemic unemployment and unemployment assistance that is federally funded, Wisconsin implemented. For employees that didn't begin work because of COVID-19, they are also eligible for the PUA unemployment insurance. And as a reminder, all of these employees are eligible to receive an extra $600 a week under FPUC.
Sarah, is there any minimum age on seasonal employees?
There.
I mean, under 18, I think we're getting at in terms of youth.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a really good question. I haven't looked in so much to.
Yeah. Well, we'll mark it and we'll see what we can find.
Yeah, that's a great question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. So that's it for what I had to show slide wise.
So Sarah, I have one more thing on the ERTC.
Yes.
I did a quick skim. I have not dug into this as much as you have. I did see that when you fill out the Form 7200, that you can use, kind of borrow against the taxes that have been withheld. So you know how you withhold the amount you're supposed to
Yes.
on your employees,
Yes.
and generally hold that and pay that to the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, you're not going to owe it to the IRS because you're going to get this credit.
Exactly.
You can actually use that money to
Yes.
pay for payroll.
Right
And
on.
that just runs so contrary to anything I ever tell people in terms of dipping into those funds.
Yes.
But in this case, the IRS Q&A specifically says that you can use those funds.
Excellent point. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I also was struck by how little information is required on the Form 7200.
Mm,
In terms of, not at this point, again, to your point, there's still many months ahead, but in terms of requiring proof of your reduction in revenue,
yes.
and I know we're getting questions about what do you need to do to prove future, the fact that your plans for the year have been squelched, and my best recommendation there is to document what you would usually do and what the revenue you would expect be. Sorry, not making a ton of sense here. And then, continue to track that.
Yes. Yes.
That's all you can do. But I mean, it's pretty, I know I'm looking here on my screen at Canopy Dance, that's like, if they don't run certain programs over the summer, so it's not necessarily the reduced revenue that may have happened too, but of the last quarter, it's the fact that you aren't going to run programs in the summer, or that you won't have your annual event, or, whatever it is that you can, like, we know now there are things that will be canceled this summer and we don't even know for sure in the fall. So documenting that and putting some numbers behind it. Sarah, any further thoughts on that?
No, I think you're exactly right. And I believe there will be more details released in the coming weeks about maybe perhaps some examples. But I think that's the best that we can do right now, is to document what would have happened and what has had to be canceled, especially for recouping right now when you don't have that history to look back to for quarter to quarter. But I think that that's probably coming for most people in July when we look back at Q2.
Yeah. We have some good questions. Will we be sending out this PowerPoint? Yes, Sarah's very helpful documents will be shared. We'll do a mass email to the people who registered for this event. And let's see, questions about the poster requirements that Sarah mentioned. She talked about that in our last webinar on April 7th, which is posted on our website, but I think it's also probably in her PowerPoint from that session, which is also on our website.
Yeah.
And
I would recommend going to the PowerPoint, to the slides.
Yeah.
The very last 2 pages of my slides are just website links, and the one with the poster is really clearly marked out there. So if you were to look, just go to the very end of the slideshow for the employment slides from 2 weeks ago on the 7th, I think, or 6th or 7th.
Yeah.
You'll find it there. Yeah.
Great. We have more questions on this issue of seasonal staff and running camps. So we hear you, we understand. A lot of people will have that question, and it looks like you're, looking for, some specific guidance. We will try to provide that for you. And so keep track of our website and our Q&A that we have there. That's hard to keep updated, so I'll just tell you, we're doing our best. I think we'll try to highlight, with different color or our date when we add, new content or when we revise something. But we'll keep it coming. And if you aren't subscribed to our updates through our website, please do so, because that's the easiest way for us to make sure that we are legally sending you information and not spamming you. So unless people have other general questions, I'll say we can wrap up this general Q&A webinar. and turn it back over to Jeff if people want to meet with him. I'm going to unmute everyone right now.
I'm done. I'm
And-
gonna run to the bathroom, but
oh.
can you take that out there?
Maybe not. I'm muting you all again. So I will wait until people get off and see who's left. Anyway, Jeff is happy to go through the application with you and his revised checklist. And for anyone who has yet to apply for the PPP. So stay on the Zoom if you want to join us. Otherwise, we will, oh, sorry, I did promise there's a couple questions. This is not really the focus of our presentation, but I know a number of independent contractors who are really hurt by the decisions that nonprofits are having to make. So we'll turn over to Jeff in just a minute, but Sarah, can you talk about how the various unemployment options do apply to self-employed persons? Oh, I unmuted you.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's a tricky spot for the organizations themselves, but the independent contractors that work for you, please advise them that as of today, they should apply for unemployment insurance benefits through the state of Wisconsin. What I'll do is, I mean, you can probably very easily navigate it yourself if you go through the DWD work or through their webpage, but you'll find a PUA insurance, and you want them to apply as soon as possible. I can't go through the application process myself. I'm very curious about how it's working. It was just released today, but they have reconstructed it so that they can ask questions to make it applicable to those that are self-employed, independent contractors. Just about any camp of person, employer or employee that's capable of working but can't because their regular source of work is either reduced or fully gone because of COVID-19. So that would be my piece of advice there. And then there's not a lot, I mean, other than, and I mean, Jeff can speak more to using an EIDL loan towards getting through some of this. For the organization itself, unfortunately, there's not as much relief if you don't have employers with regard to what I had to speak to. Does that cover it?
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
Melissa?
Jeff.
Yeah, can I just jump in on what Sarah segue on Sarah a little bit? We have had questions from some of our clients who rely on independent contractors and wondering how they can get their independent contractors paid, and concerned specifically because the PPP has such a specific prohibition against independent contractors. First, the reason the PPP has a prohibition against using PPP funds to pay independent contractors is because independent contractors can apply for PPP themselves. And it was a concern by SBA that there not be double dipping in that program. So independent contractors can apply for their own PPP, but under EIDL, if your organization relies on independent contractors to do significant parts of your normal business operations, I believe the EIDL criteria for use of loan proceeds is broad enough to include your normal reasonable use of independent contractors. So to the extent that you contract things out in the reasonable day-to-day operation of your business, EIDL funds would be able to fund independent contractors.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right. Should we segue back to the loans then? Then, all right. And breaking news, I just got an email from Sally, and she has heard back from the CDFI group that we were talking about. And they are willing, even though they're based in Illinois and Minneapolis or in Minnesota, but they would like to do a webinar and talk about logistics and how they can help. We're supposed to talk to them this afternoon to schedule that, and then we will hopefully do that for tomorrow. So we will keep you posted for those who we know are, in fact, it'd be really helpful if you could just chat me privately if you have not applied for PPP yet, or you haven't heard back from your bank and you are interested, so that then I can make sure to include you. And I could tell you that if we do this tomorrow, we will, it'll likely, I will be trying to do it between 11 and 1 or 3 o'clock, because that's what works for me. So, Jeff, back to you.
Yeah. So as I indicated at the top of the hour, we have taken feedback back from our clients who have listened to these webinars and have talked to us individually. And part of the feedback we got too is folks who felt like there were some challenges filling out the PPP application. Again, the application was written more for a for a for-profit business than for nonprofits. And so, we've been helping some of our clients, move through these documents, but there were enough questions that we thought that it might be worth just going through the application process with some suggested answers, to help you navigate this in case you have not applied for your PPP. So what I'm going to do in a second here is I'm going to bring up our checklist that's been on our website for a couple of weeks now. This checklist has been updated as of yesterday, so you can certainly go and look at it. And really, it's starting in section 5. I've created some sample answers there that you folks can put in or modify for your particular situation, but in ways that I think will be helpful to help your lender and ultimately the SBA expedite your loan. So I'm going to share a screen here. Okay, that did not work. Okay, are you guys looking at a screen? All right, so here's, again, this is in the middle of that checklist that I had prepared earlier. And this basically goes through the PPP application. If you take a look at the application, there is a box at the very top, which I call the top box. This is all pretty straightforward information. You identify the type of entity you are, probably a 501c3, although we're certainly helping certain for-profits with their businesses. 2, add your official legal name, Nonprofit Inc., a Wisconsin non-stock corporation. Your business address, if you have a doing business or trade name that's separate from your legal business name, use that. Put in your tax ID number. Then the best telephone number to reach the primary contact. If nobody's at your office, don't put that in. If it's a cell phone for the person who's filling this out, this goes to make it easy for them to say yes. So put in a telephone number where it's going to ring and somebody can answer questions for them. And then whoever that person's going to be, that should be the primary contact. And then add an email address, again, for the primary contact, the person who can help the SBA or the lender answer questions. Okay, the second box of the application, this is where we get into that average monthly payroll calculation. Again, the easiest way to do this is to just go back at 2019, figure out your average payroll for 2019, what are your payroll costs, what are your FTEs, divide that, and then you get an average monthly payroll, and then you multiply that by 2.5 and you get a number. Again, this is all part of that same calculation. And then at the very bottom of that second box, it says, you know, the purpose of the loan. Most likely it's going to be payroll. Most of you are using these PPP loans for payroll because that's what they were designed for. But again,
Jeff, can I interrupt you?
Yep.
Sorry. Back up on your average monthly payroll time 2.5. So if I understand this correctly, that's the maximum amount you can apply for. If I know there are people who are chatting me who have a reduced payroll, and so they may not want to apply for that 2.5% or 2.5 amount or multiplier, because then they would get more than they have in payroll and that they can seek as a forgivable amount. So I think I just want to confirm that you know, if you know your payroll has already been cut in half, then you should not be applying at this point for that full 2.5 times. Do you agree? Assuming you don't have any additional amount as a loan. Like if you're trying to get it all forgiven and you want it only for payroll, which is what I'm hearing from a number of people. Jeff?
yeah. So again, the program is designed for employers to either retain or rehire employees. So if you plan on bringing back your entire workforce for the next 2 months and to use PPP for that, you're allowed to take your average monthly payroll times 2.5, and assuming that you then bring everybody back and you burn through that amount, that would be forgivable. If you want to bring back if you want to have a loan that is something less than that 2.5, that is certainly not prohibited. So, but and tell me if I'm not understanding your question correctly. If you're going to bring back your entire workforce, then presumably that 2.5 should be a fairly accurate number in terms of what your real costs are going to be. But if you want to bring back something less than that, or you don't think your payroll cost is going to be that whole 2.5, then you could certainly use a smaller number.
Yeah, that's right. I just think people there may be situations from what I'm reading where people are not bringing back their whole workforce. And so they would have less to claim.
Okay, so I left it, we're at the bottom of box 2. Purpose of the loan, again, it's most likely payroll because that's what the program was designed for. But again, it can be used for other reasonable business expenses. There's no prohibition against using PPP funds for group health costs, mortgage costs, rent, utilities, interest on other debts. The only risk an organization runs is to the extent that a PPP loan is not used 75% for payroll costs within 8 weeks of funding, is it impacts the forgivability. It's not forbidden to do it, but it does impact whether or not you can have the loan forgiven. For example, using an extreme example, if your organization is really concerned with keeping the lights on and you didn't bring back any employees and use the entire amount of your PPP for rent and for utilities, you would be allowed to do that. You would just have to pay it back under the terms of the note. All right. All right. Moving on to application ownership. All right. You're going to see that here in the bold, I have created what's called an attachment to PPP borrower application. I did this because there are many places where a normal for-profit answer does not fit the application. And so I just say see attached, and then we create this little attachment that has an explanation as to why you're saying see attached. So under the applicant ownership, the question is who list everybody who owns 20% of your company. Well, nonprofits are non-stock companies. They don't have owners in the traditional sense. So in the owners box, I just say see attached. And then you should create a piece of paper. And at the top of that paper, it should say attachment to PPP borrower application, and then write something like this: application ownership. Applicant is a non-stock corporation organized under the laws of the state of Wisconsin and recognized as tax exempt under section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Accordingly, applicant has no owners. That should get you over that particular bridge. Okay? All right, moving on to the questions. Question 1 is, this has to do with whether or not you have been a bad actor along the line. So if you've not been specifically prohibited from federal funding because of previous bad acts and you are not bankrupt, then the answer to this question should be no. Okay? Presumably you know if you've done something that has caused the federal government, any agency of the federal government, to say you're not entitled to funding anymore. And if you're not bankrupt, then the answer to this question is no. So presumably for most of you, it would be no. Question 2, assuming that you're not delinquent with any loan with the federal government in the last 7 years, so you haven't defaulted with a federal government loan or been delinquent with a federal government loan in the last 7 years, and the answer to this question is also no. Okay, question 3 asks about common management. Sometimes some of our 501c3s, especially the larger ones, will have for-profit subsidiaries or other nonprofit subsidiaries. Okay, so if the applicant and those subsidiaries would normally have common management, a common board of directors, common executive director, etc. So if you have subsidiary organizations, related organizations that are under common management with the applicant, then the answer to that question is yes. And again, we've got this handy dandy attachment to PPP borrower, and you could answer something like this: applicant and Good Acts Inc., a Wisconsin non-stock corporation, share a common board of directors and share common management. Or if it's and that's more if they're related, if the applicant is the quote unquote owner of a subsidiary corporation, we could say applicant is the sole shareholder of Good Acts LLC or Good Acts Inc., a Wisconsin corporation, and is therefore deemed to control Good Acts Inc. Okay, so just a way for you to explain there's nothing wrong with having related corporations or related entities. This is just an easy way to explain them. Okay. Okay. I have yet to see this come up, but it keeps popping up in questions. If an applicant received an EIDL between January 31st and April 3rd, then the answer is no, right? Presumably there are people out there who access a fund in those 6 weeks. I've yet to meet one. Otherwise, the question is no. Okay, this is a criminal if the organization has been convicted or accused of a crime of any sort. Unless there's a crime or an accusation of a crime, then the answer is no. You also need to initial this particular answer. If the answer is yes, you can stop the application process because you're not going to get a loan. I mean, the regulations are pretty clear. If questions 5 and question 6, if you answer yes, because your organization has done something bad enough that there has been a criminal offense either proven or accused, then you're not getting this loan. Question 6 is the same thing. Has any owner or important person in the organization ever been accused of a crime or convicted of a crime? If the answer to that, most likely that will be no. If the answer is yes, then it's going to stop you right away. Okay, question 7. Okay, this gets into the US-based employees, and we've talked about this a bit. PPP is the only employees who are principal residents of the United States of America are eligible for PPP. So if you are, when you are doing your PPP applications, you should carve out anyone who isn't a legal resident of the United States. If you have operations in Africa or somewhere else, and we've had some clients that have that, you need to carve those people out. Okay, and then once you carve them out, you should be able to answer this question yes. And then question 7 is, if the applicant's not a franchise, then the answer is no. This is question 7 specifically geared towards franchisees. I don't know that we have any on this particular group. If you have a franchise question, reach out to us directly. This has to do with some fairly complicated affiliation rules that used to be in place and are now being relaxed. So if you have a particular franchise question, reach out to me directly. If you're not a franchise, just answer no. All right, now we're going on to page 2, and we just have a couple of certifications that they are going to ask you to make. So if the applicant was operating and had employees on February 15th, then the applicant should initial this certification. If the applicant needs the loan to support its ongoing operation, then the applicant should initial this certification. If the applicant intends to use the proceeds for eligible costs or authorized purposes, like payroll costs, group health, mortgage, rent, utilities, interest on other debt, then you can initial this certification. If the applicant agrees to provide the lender with documentation verifying its use of loan proceeds, this is kind of a future, this is at some point they're going to come asking you what you use the loan proceeds for. This is a certification that you're going to provide all of that follow-up information. This is an acknowledgement that you folks are going to use the loan, that you understand that in order for the loan to be forgiven, you have to use that 75-25% calculation in the 8 weeks after funding, so that you can't come back and say later, oh, I didn't know that. The next question is, you're applying only for one PPP loan. Actually only receiving one PPP loan. You can certainly apply for more, but you can only receive one. If you get one, you should put the brakes on any other ones. And then, have you been truthful, and that you understand, there should be a space there, and that you understand that the SBA is going to share this information with other government agencies, etc. So anyways, I hope that helps people with some of their questions on this. Again, this is all on our website. Take some time and work through it. I'm now going to stop share and come back on, and certainly would entertain any questions that people have. Melissa, are you there?
Or yeah, I unmuted everyone now. And yeah, the only question I see was there's a question about, I think under nonprofit ownership, you say see attached for like additional information. And someone's asking, can you do the same on the EIDL?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm
go ahead.
comfortable with that. Yeah, basically, because I just was noticing from the, say we were just focusing and just going to do Edgewood and leave it at that. It's just that the, I think on that one, the pro forma, I think had a total of 70,000 between the purchase.
Yeah, I know that. But
And the rehab. And the app that you sent, it was like,
yeah,
it was less than that. So I was just trying to detail. I would say just do a sources and uses.
I think that we're listening to somebody else's conversation about something else.
I think you're right.
Sorry, I
listen.
need to, everyone is unmuted unless they mute themselves. Beware.
I don't think Todd knows that he's
Yeah, I think
unmuted.
we're okay with that. I would say, yeah, you could kind of maybe, if it's possible to, cap it at the 70 range, if that works out okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just muted him.
Hey, I have a question. I just unmuted myself. So we have about half of our FTEs furloughed, but they're going to be brought back sometime in June. So to my understanding, it would be okay to apply. We just wouldn't want to apply for like the full amount since they wouldn't be starting to be paid again until the end of June or July. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. You can certainly apply for less than the maximum eligibility.
Okay, I just didn't, because if they don't bring them back, then I think we're out of luck. But the plan is to bring the people back, so we'll find out.
Jeff and Melissa, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Please.
Jeff and Melissa, we have had all of our documents in place, and we believe we've applied correctly, and we applied to our to Chase Bank, who we have had a relationship with for many, many years. And we get to the very or near the end of the application. And at that point, when we click next, it says, this part of our site is currently not working. And we have not been able to get past that point in the submission process. Chase did send us an email yesterday saying we're still in their queue and please finish the application. Do you see the barrier that we're hitting?
So just to make sure that I understand you correctly, you have a relationship with Chase, you've gone through the process with them, you've gotten to the next step, and there's nowhere to go because it says you can't access the next step, something to that effect.
Right, specifically, Jeff, it says this part of our site is currently not working. But again, we were very, very prepared. All payroll documents, all 990s, all financial statements. We uploaded all of that in our application. We believe that we understood all of these things and did everything correctly. And I'll throw in one other question quickly, Jeff. Our other bank is Summit Credit Union. So, but at this point, we have not started the application with Summit because it appears that our application with Chase is, well, it's in their queue. But anyway, do you have any insights at all into Chase's site?
No.
Yeah, I thought
But what I would say, do you have a relationship manager that you could reach out to and just get some comfort that if you're in the queue, you're one, and this is Jeff speculating. I'm in pure speculation mode, but my guess is that Chase is the biggest bank in America. So presumably they have millions and millions of applications in their pipe. And my guess is that you have gotten to a point that's just kind of, there's a log jam there, and their computer infrastructure can't handle it. And so it's just saying, hey, there's no place to go right now. I'm not sure that's the case, but that seems like a pretty good guess. What I would do is reach out to your relationship manager. If you have a relationship with someone locally who could just give you some kind of assurance that, yeah, we hear there's a log jam there, but if you're in the pipe, you're probably going to be okay. That would be my first call. And I would consider, especially because Summit has we've heard good things about Summit. I would consider making a separate application with your friends at Summit as a backup, knowing that if one of them funds, you're going to have to pull the plug on the other.
Okay, we believe that while we are still in the Chase queue, that our completed application has not been submitted.
Yeah.
Based on the email they sent us yesterday.
And do you have a local relationship manager?
Well, our local relationship manager would just be the branch manager at our nearby Chase branch.
Yeah. And he or she doesn't have any insights?
She seems unreachable.
Ah. Well, because I believe your best point of contact is your relationship manager. So I would try to reach out to her again. If you can't get her, I would call the local branch where she works and ask if you can talk to the manager there. Okay. And tell them your concerns and see if they can get you any guidance.
Thank you.
And again, to the extent that you can't get guidance or the guidance you get isn't positive, then I hate to tell you to do it again, but these are trying times, and your next call might be to Summit.
We have tried to resubmit our application every day.
Yeah.
And we were already submitting our application when you and Melissa held your first webinar. We already had all of our documents in place and had created a payroll summary with all the we did everything the right way.
Then it's been 2 weeks. I think you need to apply at Summit or somewhere else. Again, anecdotally, what we're hearing is that the big banks, and again, this is me speculating, Chase is a very, very good bank, but the bigger banks we're hearing are taking care of their biggest customers. And so you know, if you've been trying to get your final application in for 2 weeks and you haven't gotten any response yet, I would say you should start thinking about a backup plan.
Thank you very much to Sarah, Melissa, and Jeff for doing this public service. We appreciate it very much.
Well, thanks to all of you who I know are doing your best in these difficult times. So I think we'll wrap it up now. Do send me any last minute chats if if you know you want to make sure you're part of another webinar on the PPP, which we hope will happen tomorrow. And otherwise, we'll keep sending out information, and here's hoping for some action from Congress this week with some more money. So
Can I ask one question before your break runs out?
Yeah.
We are a nonprofit and we're all on contract. We are not employees. And
yeah,
so I'm having a little problem with how I can count them as employees if we're all on contract. So what
It's-
do we do?
yeah, and that's you really can't for the PPP, unfortunately. So the EIDL you can, the other loan, and otherwise it's the ability to, I guess, as contractors to apply individually for unemployment. But unfortunately, the PPP counts payroll for employees. And there's also rules about when they were employees. I think adding them now, I'm not sure how that would work, but
Yeah, I mean, we work like employees, but we're all on contract. We
I
don't
know.
get benefits and all that stuff. So
The independent contractors are eligible to apply for a PPP themselves
individually, okay,
individually.
yeah,
okay.
yeah, as a small business, right. All right, did that get everyone? Okay, I see one more question here. Yeah, okay, well, we'll try to follow up individually. I don't feel like I have an answer, or I would have answered it, but okay. Thank you. And we'll try to keep the information coming. Great, thanks everyone, bye-bye.
Thank you.